In this video, we're going to be discussing cards, exactly how they're played, what they do, and their various types. We're going to start off with the anatomy of a card. I've got an example here. The card has several important aspects of the card we're going to discuss. At the top, you can see its name. Normally, this isn't too important, but it helps to specify things. Next, you have the card's faction identity, and this is represented in 3 places on the card. The most striking is this icon here, which this is the pirate icon, but additionally the color of its backdrop and the color of this banner here represent the faction of the card. There are 6 factions, as are marked on the board here, and they all have a unique color, which is on the board to help you identify which cards are which faction. Inside this faction box here is also the cost of the card, the number underneath the icon. This means that in order to play this card, you're going to require a stack of a specific size. The card's text is here. This determines what the card actually does when you play it. And this text over here is referred to as the card's bin. This has no gameplay effect, but it has an effect when it comes to deck building, so this will be covered in a future video. There are 5 types of card. The most basic is the event. Events are played during your play phase. They have an effect, and then they are immediately discarded. This card here has a bonus icon in the second part of its text, this icon here. This means that you get an extra effect if you are holding the artifact of this card's color. Not only events have bonuses, all kinds of cards can have bonuses. Reactions are very similar to events, but they are not necessarily played during your own play phase. You can play them in response to a wide variety of things that can happen during your or your opponent's turns. There's a rather large section in the rulebook on exactly what you can and cannot respond to, and I advise you read that because I don't really want to go over all of that here. Upgrades you play and they sit in front of you. You don't discard them. They either provide some kind of long-term passive benefit, or in the case of the card we're looking at now, they provide you with an extra option that you can take. This card you need to activate in order to use its cost, so you can only use it once per round. You'll use it after you ready it in your ready phase, and it has some additional cost. This particular ability states it can only be used at event speed, because most abilities can be used at reaction speed. You can play them during your opponent's turn in response to their effects in the same way you could with a reaction. This is a weapon. Weapons are very similar to upgrades in how they function. The only difference is that you're not allowed to have more than 2 weapons at once. And these are covers. Covers are a little bit more complicated. They have the text at the top that says cover 1. Sometimes it won't say 1, sometimes it will say 2 or 3. When you play a cover, you choose a tile next to your character to put the cover into. If it says cover 2, then you choose more than 1 tile, but they still have to be adjacent to each other. They can't be placed like here and here. You can potentially place them so that they're not all adjacent to you. For example, this would be a valid way of playing a cover 2, so long as one of the tiles is next to you. The cover continues to provide value in a similar manner to an upgrade, but is usually only useful while you're adjacent to it. And covers also block lines. You can't move through a cover, you can't shoot through a cover, you can't draw a line through a cover to see who you can target. So they're very helpful for that. We have had a brief discussion on stacks, but I'm just going to reiterate some of the important points because it's relevant when you think about these cards. So as you said, these cards have a cost. In order to play them, you need to use a stack of the appropriate size. So this has a size of 1, so if I had a stack of size 1 with at least 1 pirate card in it, I could play the card with this stack. Normally, you'll be tapping exhausting stacks during your play phase. But for reactions, you can do this whenever you like, and similarly for for abilities, you can do this whenever you like. Stacks do not have a maximum size, and there's no limit to how many stacks you have, so long as you have cards in your hand during your draw phase, you can continue to place cards in stacks indefinitely, although only once per turn. You're going to want to be balancing whether you want to be building up large stacks to play your expensive cards, or building up large numbers of stacks so you can play large numbers of cards or use large numbers of abilities. talked about this bonus icon here. The most important other icon here is the exhaust icon. This means that you need to activate the card in order to use it, so you're not going to be able to use it again this round, unless you have something that can ready it. Sometimes a card may say you may, in which case, or in this case, you can. In this situation, you're allowed to choose not to take the action, but some cards do not have that text. For example, this card here, it says discard a card from your hand when you're targeted by an event or reaction. It does not say you may, and so you must do this action if you're able to do so. Which is why it says if you do before doing the effect. If you fail to do so because you have no cards, you don't get the effect. Next, we're going to discuss attacking your opponent. So the first thing to know is that players have a health. Players start off with 6 health, usually represented by a dice in their play area, and this health can be reduced by dealing damage to them. Sometimes you'll deal damage with events like this one, sometimes you'll deal damage with weapons, and sometimes damage can come from other sources. When you deal damage to someone, you simply reduce their health. When someone's health gets to 0, they will die. They will immediately be sent to the tavern, and any artifacts they were holding will be dropped. They drop 1 in the tile they were in, and the rest can go in adjacent tiles. You may continue to move if you have movement in your turn after you kill someone, so you can potentially pick up the artifacts they have, but if you're not careful, then other people will be able to grab them before you can. When you kill another player, you get 2 victory points. If you are a bit worried about your health, so you've taken some damage throughout the game and now you're a bit low, then when you go back to the tavern, at the start of your next turn, before any actions, before your ready phase, you can decide to skip the entire turn and rest in the tavern, at which point you're returned to full health. When you're killed, you will be able to act as normal next turn. You'll have a new champion in the tavern. They get to inherit all of the upgrades, weapons, and cover of the previous champion. I believe that's all we're going to be discussing for this video. This should give you enough of an idea of how to play the rules to be able to play the basic game. In order to play the basic game, what I advise you do is, instead of trying to do a proper deck building session, you just pick one of the 6 factions. I personally think Pirate and Navy are the easiest to pilot for new players, and take all the cards of that faction and just use that as your deck. It gives a way of playing quite a balanced game that helps you to understand the rules before we really worry too much about deck building. The next video will include instructions for how to do deck building, as well as extra rules for a game for only 2 or 3 players, as if you try playing with just 2 or 3 players, you'll quickly find that the board is a bit too big, and players can too easily run away from each other. The game is a lot better when it gets a bit more cluttered.